Hello cherry lovers. Today we're going to be talking about something a tad bit different, even though I've got a great recipe for you with pinto beans, so stay tuned. Hello. Today, as I said, we're going to be talking about my famous pinto beans. What I'm doing today is not just making a pinto bean recipe, but I'm going to be canning the pinto beans. Larry and I had a pretty good garden going this year, and so we did a lot of canning. But I'm going to show you my recipe that I use for canning pinto beans. And the first of all, if Larry will take a look here. Now, what I have in this pot is the ham hock. As you can see, look at that. The meat is falling off the bone. But the first thing that I had to do before I prepared the meat is I took the pinto beans, and Larry will take a look over here in this pot. I've got 4 pounds of dry pinto beans. And what I had to do first, I rinse my beans and sort them, because sometimes you get dirt and you get debris in your beans. And so you sort them, rinse that all out, and then you fill your pot. And since this is 4 pounds of beans, I had to practically fill that pot to the top, because those beans expand when they're soaking. And I soaked the beans overnight. And you don't actually have to soak your beans overnight. If you are ready to do your beans that day, you don't want to work, you can do what is called a quick soak. I usually do a soak overnight, but I have done the quick soak. So what you can do is you take your pinto beans, you fill them about 2 inches above the pinto beans with water. And then you turn that on and let that come to a complete boil before you start your timer. But you boil the pinto beans for your quick soak for 1 minute. Let it do a full boil for 1 minute. And then you turn your pinto beans off. And then you get a lid and you put it on that pot. And you let that pot cook or sit for 1 whole hour. And then you can proceed with the same recipe that I'm about to use as if you used it overnight. That is a quick soak if you prefer to use that. Now, again, what I do, I've got my beans, they're all washed, they're pre-sorted, they're soaked, they're rinsed. I took the beans after they'd rinsed overnight and I emptied all that water out. And I put some fresh, clean water in there and rinsed them again and poured all the water out. So as you can see, there's no water in that pot. Now, here's something that I've read as to, because I wondered, well, what's the point? Why do you have to soak beans? Now, I can't prove this because I never actually ran this test, but I read where that if you soak your beans, it removes what is called the indigestible sugars that cause gas, that cause flatulence. So again, I don't know if I can prove that. I can't prove that because I've never tested it, but that's what I read. Let's go on to the next step. So now that my beans have soaked, they're all washed and rinsed, I start preparing my meat. Now, what I use is ham hocks. This is a pork hock. You can use smoked ham hocks or you can use the regular ham hocks. But I put into this water 1 large onion, a tablespoon of minced garlic, and you want to use 3 ham hocks. I use 3 ham hocks only because of the size, because normally I just use 1 large ham hock. But this has, again, as Larry's getting down in there to see, it has a really, really nice ham hock and the onions and the garlic. And I let my ham hock cook for probably between 2 and 3 hours, because that's 3 large ham hocks. And then you just let it cook till it's just like that. The meat is falling off the bone. The juices are prepared. Now, in canning, I don't add the ham hocks into the jars. I actually just put the beans into the pot to season them, and with the flavors of the onions and the garlic and the ham hock. But also what I use, this right here is a ham flavored. Let me open this up so you can see. It's not bouillon cubes, but it's like a powder. It's a little thicker than a powder, but I use 3 teaspoons of this in my recipe. And I wait until my ham hock has been cooking for about an hour. Then I add in the onions and I add in the garlic and I add in the ham flavored base, because you want to add the ham flavor in there while it's boiling, so you can stir that up and get it mixed up real good. And then I let it cook for another 1 to 2 hours, depending on how tender and juicy that ham hock is. As you can see, the flavors are all nicely mixed in there. And what we're going to do next is just take this water and empty it into this pot and with the beans, and then we're going to let that cook for only 30 minutes. You say, well, it takes longer than that to cook pinto beans. Yes, it does if you were just going to cook them. But I'm going to can them today. So we're going to put the juice and the meat, everything together into the pot with the beans. I'm going to let that cook for 30 minutes, and then I'm going to come back and show you what we're going to do. Okay, guys, I've added the broth with the ham hocks, with the onions, and with the garlic into this huge pot, as you can see. Now, what's going to happen is I'm going to cook this for 30 minutes, only 30 minutes, because the pressure cooker is going to do some of my cooking of the beans. Now, I also wanted you to know, I've got some vegetable broth here. You can use chicken broth or you can use vegetable broth. I use vegetable broth today because that's what I have, and I use either or. But if you happen to start cooking and your 30 minutes is up and you don't have enough liquid in your pot, just add some of that in there. Or if when you're canning, you get to the end, you don't have enough, I'm going to share that with you too when we get to that point, but you can add some more of that liquid. It's perfectly fine. But again, I've got my ham hocks, I got my beans, my onions, my seasonings are all in here. You can adjust your seasonings according to your own flavor. I use the ham seasoning. Remember, this ham flavor is salty, so just adjust your salt and your pepper according to the taste that it gives for you. Some people like a little more salt. I like a little less salt. So take care to make sure you adjust your seasoning. Now I'm going to let this boil, but remember, this is important. Let it come to a boil. And of course, this big pot of pinto beans is going to take a few minutes before it ever gets to a full boil. So once it gets to the boil, then you let it set your timer for 30 minutes, let it boil for 30 minutes, and then I'll come back and show you how to do the canning process right after that. Okay guys, this is where we're at now. I have my beans. What I've done here is sorted out all the meat. I separated the ham hocks from the beans, and here's the water that was left over from the beans. And this is also, the ham hock has been taken out of here. So you just got water or the ham hock broth, and you got the beans. And what I'm going to do here, I've got some jars that have been sterilizing, they're heating. I got them hot in the sink, and I'm going to take a jar and I'm going to show you how to fill these. But real quick, I want Larry to show you also the lids. The lids that are just warming, you don't want to let them come to a boil, just kind of steaming there. Because one thing you got to remember, if you put those on a boil, you might damage the rubber on there. You don't want to do that. You just want to keep them nice and warm. So if you can put it on low. Okay, and I'm going to go over here and get started. I'm going to grab a jar out of the water. I'm going to bring that back over here. And we're going to fill this cup. Now, here's one other thing I want to say real quick. This is the measurer, 1 inch. This actually measures 1 inch. You want to put your beans 1 inch from the top. And right here, because I've measured it, it's 1 inch. So you want to keep it just below that line right there. That's your 1 inch marker. Okay. We're going to put about, I think it took about 3 scoops. I've got one over here that's filled already. So it's not quite. It's more like 2 scoops. All right. And then you want to take your broth that you've seasoned with your ham hock. And I took that off just to check it. But you want to put that back on. And what you want to do with your liquid is to fill it just above the beans. Just. And you can see that. A little bit more. Just above your beans. Okay, and now you want to take your paper towel or your wet rag or whatever it is that you have and make sure that you remove all the juice or liquids or beans or whatever that might have touched the top of the jar. And then we're going to take our lid from the water. We're going to place it right on top. And then we're going to take the ring from the water and place it also right on top. And what you want to do, you don't want to tighten it down, but you want to finger tighten it. Finger tighten it. And I've watched a video where if you just squeeze it with your hands, don't squeeze it real tight, because then you can have problems inside of your canner and it could pop, explode, or whatever. But you don't want to tighten it. Just want to finger tighten. Finger tighten it is pretty simple. And there you go. You have your broth just above the beans. You have it at 1 inch below, right at that rim, just below that rim. voila, you got a perfect can of pinto beans, and I'm very excited. I love pinto beans, and Larry does too. Okay, so we're going to give you a chance to see me do that again. Here we go. Going to get a jar. Bring the water. Bring that back over here. We're going to fill it with about 2 scoops. I think it measured out to be 2 scoops of beans. And if you get too many, it's okay. You can always take a few out. And if you don't get quite enough, then you can add a few more. Like so. Okay, that's pretty good. And you want to get you about 1.5 scoops of broth. Now, another thing concerning the broth for the beans. If you run out, if your broth has cooked down way too low and you don't have enough to go around to your beans, absolutely no worries, guys. Because the only thing you have to do, as I said, vegetable broth or chicken broth. Add that to your jar. You could even put water in there if you want it. Because remember, these beans have already been seasoned. Seasoned very nicely with the ham hock seasoning, the onions, and the garlic. Clean that off. And then we want to get out of our pot here. Place that on there. Like so. And then we want to get a ring and place that on there. Remember, finger tight. Not too tight, just finger tight. And there you go. And take a look. Just at that ring. And the broth is just above the beans. And that's what your goal is, to get the broth just above the beans. And we're going to do one more. And we're going to bring this over here. Put this on top and get us a couple of scoops. Put that into your jar. Got quite a few beans here. In case you were wondering, now if my estimation is right, might not be exactly perfect, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to get about 12 of these jars of canned beans. Get us some broth in there. I'm using, as you can see, also wide mouth jars. You can use the wide mouth or you can use the regular. It does not matter. Okay. And that's what I forgot to do in the other 2 jars, but I will go back and do that. This simply is to release the bubbles. And you just put this, it's just like a skewer, a wooden skewer. Put it on the outside of the jar. And I will go back and do this one because I did not show you that. There's a couple of them I didn't. But make sure you use that to just release the air bubbles. And then we're going to get a lid. Put that on, center it. And then we want to get a ring out of the water. These are just not boiling, but just kept warm. And put that on there. And there we go. We're going to get one more. Let's just do one more, just to make sure you got it. It's really, really simple, guys. I like making canning the pinto beans because it's pretty simple. After you cook your beans, season them up real good. The canning part is the easy part. Get you a couple of, a little bit more. Bring that up just a little bit more. Okay. All right, and then we're going to get some juice, some broth. And I've tasted this broth. Make sure you taste it. See if it's to your liking. And I didn't put that on there that time, but that's okay. I didn't spill any, guys. Okay, and we're going to fill that again just above the beans. Okay. Very good. And then we're going to clean the rim. Make sure that the purpose of this is not to dry it off. At first, when I first started canning, I thought, oh, dry the jar. No, it's to remove, again, any kind of juice or maybe some beans that might have touched it, so that when you put your lid on, you'll get a good seal. That's what we're looking for. Okay, that on there. And then we're going to go back and get a ring. Okay. Finger tight, guys. There you go. One more check. Okay, guys. I finished filling my jars, inch down, just like I showed you in the prior jars. But what I want to show you here is that we've got these filled. And if you'll notice, these are the wide mouth jars. You can see that. There are some that are not wide mouth. This canner will only hold, let's see, 3, 6, 8, only 8 of the wide mouth jars. So I'm putting this in here with my hand because this is not hot yet. The jars aren't hot. But also you have to remember when you're putting these into the pressure canner to add, what is it, 2 quarts of water? 3 quarts of water into this pressure canner for this type of pressure canner. We're not using the water bath. The water bath will take more. So with this you use 3 quarts of water. You bring that water to a heated temperature. It's nice and simmering. And then you can add your jars in into your pressure canner. Okay, as you can see in this pot, if Larry will zoom in here, we have 8 jars in here. Normally, when we use the small mouth jars, it takes 10. But this is the first time I've used the large mouth jars. And today, it only holds 8. So, okay, now the next step here, we're going to put the lid on. You have to line this up. You can see the V here and the V there. Line that up, seal it, make sure that they're lined up. Then we're going to turn the heat up to high. And then we're going to put the bubbler on. And then this is going to start bubbling. Once this starts bubbling, I'm going to drop the heat back. And then you're going to see this pop up. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to come back and show you what that looks like when it gets to a certain temperature. Once it gets to a certain temperature and this is bubbling, the bubbler will start to rattle. Now, your oven may be set at one temperature. I'm not sure, you have to base it on your stove. Mine at high. It'll bring it to the temperature I need it to be. And then once it starts to bubble, I'll set it back to 9, according to my stove. And then I'm going to let it cook for 75 minutes based on my altitude and what I'm cooking. So I'm going to come back and show you, though, what it looks like when this little button pops up. Okay, guys, as you can see, if you look right here, this top, it popped up. That is part of the process. It takes about 5 minutes for that to pop up. And now the next thing that's going to happen, you're going to see this bubbler, it's going to start rattling. And once this starts rattling, I'm going to drop the heat down to the temperature that'll just keep it rattling. You don't want this going all over the place because it can be a little bit too high. So once this starts to rattle, I'm going to drop the temperature on my stove. But I will come right back and show you when that happens. Okay, as you can see, the bubbler is bubbling. Took about 13 minutes from start to finish, from the time I put this lid on till now, about 13 minutes. And so what we're going to do is, we've got it on high, but we're going to reduce it down to 9 now. Okay, guys, the top is up and it is now pressurized. That's what that top means. It's up and we're at the pressure that we need to be at. The bubbler is bubbling and I'm going to turn my heat down from high to 9. It was on high, I turned it down to 9. Now, our bubbler is set at 10 pounds. It's set at 10 pounds of pressure based on our altitude. And as you can see, it has weights on there. Our altitude is below 1,000. And if your altitude is higher than that, your pressure would have to be a little bit higher than that. So we use 10 pounds of pressure. Larry's looking at me to keep my eye on the camera, not him. But we are at 10 pounds of pressure. And so that's why we're at where we're at, the altitude. But I'm going to show you also at the end how to take this out. And what happens to this pressure cooker when this little top button drops down and then the bubbler stops bubbling, how to let the steam off so that you don't get burned. Okay, so we will see you shortly. Okay, now I'm going to set my timer for 75 minutes. That's the time to process these beans. And after the 75 minutes are up, I'll be back to show you how to depressurize, is what I call it, this pot. We'll be back shortly. Okay, now this is the next step in the process, guys. I'm going to take this pot off well, let's turn the eye off first. Turn the eye off. I'm going to take the pot off that eye. Carefully and gently sit it down over here. You don't want to slide it against your stove. You might damage your stove. But the next thing that we're going to do is, let me turn my timer off, is release this bubbler, the pressure gauge, and let that steam out. Now, what's going to happen, this little lever here at the top is going to go down once all the steam is released, and then it'll be time to open it up. But I'm going to let this do its process. It's going to take a few minutes, and I'll come back and tell you exactly how long that took, and then we'll finish from there. Okay, guys, the safety valve, as you can see, is down now. And what we're going to do is slowly and gently, this works better.
Out of the way. There you go.
There you go. I'm going to put the gloves back on to prevent the steam from burning me. But you just take this lid off now that that safety valve is down. It took about 3 minutes for that to go down. We're going to take this off. I'm going to put this over here. And as you can see, the jars are all ready to be removed. And I've got my, let's take this off. It's a little bit easier. Also, I wanted you to take a look over here. Larry's going to point that over there. And I wanted you to see, when you take your jars out, make sure you have a towel or something down for the area that you're going to put it in, because you don't want to put those hot jars onto something cold. Put them onto the towels. That way you don't have to worry about them cracking. Okay, and we're just going to go in here and remove these jars. Look at that. Nice and steaming. There's my timer. I'm going to turn that off. Okay. And we're just going to continue to take these out. Make sure you do this slowly and carefully. You don't want to get burned. But those beans are ready. I can't wait to try them. And I have some more that I'm going to can, because I had a few beans left over, enough to make 5 more jars. Hoping that I'm not moving too quickly. Okay. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm going to be doing some more canning. And I want to take the time to explain to you some different information about the pressure canner. I prefer the pressure canner. I've used the water bath canning before for actually canned some cherries with apple juice, which was really good. But I like this pressure canner much better. Okay. I think there's one more in here. Get that out. There we go. Now, the next thing you're going to hear is the pling, 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 pling sound. That's the sound that the lids make when they seal. And you should start hearing that any moment. I've got the, see, did you hear that? You can hear them, but I've got the other camera going, so hopefully you'll get to hear them all seal. So there you have it. We've got, let's see, how many was that? 8 cans of canned pinto beans. And I've got, like I said, 5 more jars that I'm about to put in there. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Like and subscribe, guys. I hope you've enjoyed it. Have a great night, cherry lovers.